In the name of Allah, most loving and merciful. In the ancient city of Fez, the year was 1911. The air was thick with the scent of spices and old leather. Inside the hallowed halls of Al-Qarawiyyin University, a young scholar named Abdul Hamid sat before his teacher. The old sheikh's eyes were kind, but serious. He spoke of a land across the great ocean, a place called America. It was a new world, full of people from every corner of the earth. He told Abdul Hamid that it was his mission to go there. He was to carry the message of Islam, a message of peace and submission to God. To this distant shore, it was a heavy responsibility, a journey into the unknown. But Abdul Hamid's heart felt a strange sense of calm. This was his path. Leaving Fez was like leaving a part of his soul behind. Every alleyway held a memory, every call to prayer a familiar comfort. He read in the newspaper about a ship called Titanic that would bring him to America. He traveled to Tangier port, where the sea met the sky in a brilliant blue line. His family was there to say goodbye. His mother held him tightly, her tears wetting the shoulder of his jalaba. His father, a man of few words, placed a firm hand on his shoulder, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Abdul Hamid's younger sister, Layla, gave him a small, worn copy of the Quran. "Do not forget us, brother," she whispered. He promised he would not. He promised to write. He promised to build a new life, a new community, under the same sky they all shared. The journey to Cherbourg, France, where he would board the great ship, was long. Abdul Hamid spent the time in reflection and prayer. He thought of the stories his teacher had told him, of the prophets who had left their homes to spread God's word. He was not a prophet, only a humble student, but he felt a connection to their sacrifice. He clutched the small Quran from Layla, its familiar weight a comfort in his hands. He looked out at the changing landscape, from the sun-baked earth of Morocco to the green fields of Europe. He was a traveler for the sake of Allah, and this thought gave him strength. The path was set before him, and he would walk it with faith. As he stood on the quay in Cherbourg, he saw it for the first time, the Titanic. It was a floating palace, larger than anything he had ever imagined. Its black hull rose like a cliff from the water, its four great funnels reaching for the clouds. It was a symbol of a new age, of human ambition and power. Yet, Abdul Hamid knew that all power belonged to God alone. This magnificent vessel was merely a creation, a temporary home on a vast and unpredictable sea. He carried his small bag aboard, a man from an old world stepping into a new one, his mission clear in his mind. He was here to plant a seed of faith in a new land. On board the Titanic, Abdul Hamid discovered he was not alone. He soon met other Muslims, travelers from different parts of the Ottoman Empire. There was the Tuma family from a village near Beirut, a kind man named Hassan, his wife Amina, and their two young children, Yusuf and Mariam. They were farmers seeking a better life in America, their eyes full of hope. There were also merchants from Damascus and artisans from Cairo. They were all drawn together by their shared faith. A small island of familiarity in the midst of the grand, bustling ship. They found a quiet corner on the third-class deck, a space they could make their own. Each day, Abdul Hamid would lead the small congregation in prayer, facing towards Makkah. Their voices would rise in unison, a soft murmur of devotion against the constant thrum of the ship's engines. The other passengers would sometimes watch, curious but respectful. After prayers, Abdul Hamid would share stories. He spoke of the Prophet Muhammad's journey from Makkah to Medina, the Hijrah. He told them tales of Islamic scholars and the golden age of Baghdad. His voice was gentle and steady, a source of comfort and knowledge for his fellow travelers. The Tuma children, Yusuf and Mariam, would sit at his feet, their eyes wide with wonder, listening to tales of courage and faith. Hassan Tuma and Abdul Hamid became close friends. Hassan spoke of his dream to own a small piece of land in America, to grow olives and figs just as his family had for generations. Abdul Hamid spoke of his mission, to establish a place of learning and worship, a place where Muslims could come together. They shared mint tea that Hassan had carefully brought from home, the familiar taste, a reminder of all they had left behind. They were men from different walks of life, a farmer and a scholar, but they were united by their shared journey and their deep trust in God's plan. They were brothers on this vast ocean. The days passed peacefully. The Muslim community created a rhythm for themselves. They shared meals, talked of their homes and dreamed of their futures. Abdul Hamid became a mentor to them all, his wisdom a guiding light. He helped a merchant write a letter home in classical Arabic and listened patiently as Amina Tumar worried about her children in this new world. He reminded them that they were all in Allah's hands, that their journey was a test of their faith. The great ship sailed smoothly across the calm Atlantic, and for a few beautiful days it felt as though their new life had already begun, full of peace and fellowship. On the night of April 14th, the sea was as black as ink, and as still as glass. The air was bitingly cold. Below deck, Abdul Hamid had just finished his Isha prayer. He was reading from Layla's Quran when a sudden, violent shudder ran through the entire ship. It was a deep, grinding jolt that threw him from his seat. A terrible scraping sound echoed from deep within the vessel's belly, a sound of metal tearing apart. For a moment, there was a stunned silence, followed by a rising murmur of confusion and fear. The engine stopped, and the sudden quiet was more frightening than the noise had been. Something was terribly wrong. Abdul Hamid immediately thought of the Tumar family. He rushed to their cabin, his heart pounding in his chest. He found Hassan trying to calm a crying Amina, while Yusuf and Mariam huddled together, their eyes wide with terror. "We must go to the deck," Abdul Hamid said, his voice firm and calm, cutting through their panic. He helped Amina wrap the children in warm blankets. He spoke soothing words, reminding them to trust in Allah. His presence was a rock in the rising tide of chaos. He led them out into the narrow corridors, which were now crowded with frightened people speaking in a dozen different languages. On the deck, the scene was one of controlled chaos. Crew members were shouting orders, and passengers were milling about, their faces pale in the stark electric light. The ship was already tilting, a slow, almost imperceptible slant towards the bow. Abdul Hamid kept the Tumar family close, shielding the children from the worst of the panic. He saw the lifeboats being uncovered and knew what it meant. There would not be enough boats for everyone. He looked at Hassan, and an unspoken understanding passed between them. Their duty was to protect the women and children. They were men of faith, and this was their test. As the crew began loading the lifeboat, calling for women and children first, Abdul Hamid guided Amina and her children forward. The deck was now steeply angled, making it difficult to stand. Amina clutched his arm, her knuckles white. "What about you? What about Hassan?" she cried. Abdul Hamid looked at her with a serene expression. "Go," he said gently. "Allah will be with you. Raise your children to be good Muslims. Tell them of our journey." He helped her and the children into a swaying lifeboat. Hassan hugged his family one last time, and his face a mask of grief and love, before stepping back to stand beside Abdul Hamid. The lifeboat carrying Amina and her children was lowered into the dark, icy water. It pulled away from the sinking giant, a tiny vessel of hope in an ocean of despair. Abdul Hamid and Hassan stood at the railing, watching until it was just a speck in the distance. The sounds around them grew louder, the roar of steam escaping from the funnels, the splintering of wood and the cries of the desperate. The great ship was dying, its lights flickering as if taking their last breath. Men and women were praying, weeping, and holding each other close. It was a scene of profound human tragedy, a testament to the fragility of life. Abdul Hamid turned to Hassan and the other Muslim men who had gathered around him. There was fear in their eyes, but there was also resolve. He spoke to them. "Brothers, we remember Allah. Our lives are in His hands. We came from Him, and to Him we shall return. He led them in a final prayer. They stood on the slanting deck, facing the direction of a marker they could not see, and submitted themselves to God's will one last time. Their voices joined together, a final, defiant act of faith against the encroaching chaos. They were not just passengers on a sinking ship. They were believers meeting their destiny with dignity back in Morocco. As the moon shone brightly in the sky, Layla awoke from a vivid dream. She had seen her brother, Abdul Hamid, standing on the deck of a great ship. He was surrounded by a brilliant, warm light, and his face was peaceful, serene. He looked at her and smiled, a smile that conveyed love and farewell. He did not speak, but she felt his words in her heart. "Do not grieve for me. I am with my Lord." A sense of profound peace settled over her, a strange comfort in the face of a loss she did not yet understand. She knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that her brother's journey had reached its end, and that he was safe, on the Titanic. As the bow plunged deeper into the sea, Abdul Hamid held Hassan's hand. The end was near. He thought of his family in Fez, of his teacher's mission, and of the seeds of faith he had hoped to plant. Perhaps this was his mission, to show courage and faith in the face of death. He closed his eyes and recited the shahādah, the declaration of faith. La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. The icy water of the North Atlantic rose to meet him, but in his heart there was only the warm light of unwavering faith. His physical journey was over, but his spiritual one was just beginning. Amina Tuma and her children, Yusuf and Mariam, were rescued from the icy sea by the Carpathia. They arrived in New York, heartbroken but alive. Amina never forgot the courage of her husband, Hassan, or the serene strength of Shaykh Abdul Hamid. She carried their memory with her as she began her new life in a strange and often difficult land. She fulfilled the promise she made, raising her children to be proud of their faith and their heritage. She told them stories not just of their father's sacrifice, but of the scholar from Fez who led them in prayer and faced death with a peaceful heart. The story of Shaykh Abdul Hamid became a legend within the growing Muslim American community. It was a story of courage, sacrifice, and the enduring power of faith. Yusuf and Mariam Tuma grew up carrying this legacy. Yusuf became a successful businessman, and Mariam a respected teacher. They never forgot the lessons of the man who had comforted them on the deck of the sinking ship. They shared his story with their children and grandchildren, ensuring that the light of his example would not be extinguished by time or distance. His memory became a cornerstone of their family's identity in America. Years later, the Muslim community in the city where the Tuma family had settled decided to build a permanent place of worship. They had been praying in rented halls and basements for too long. It was Yusuf Tuma who stood before the community and proposed that the new masjid be named in honor of the man who had dreamed of such a place. He spoke of Abdul Hamid's mission, his leadership on the Titanic, and his ultimate sacrifice. The story moved everyone, a powerful reminder of the deep roots of Islam in America, roots watered by faith. Masjid Abdul Hamid was built, its minaret a graceful finger pointing toward the heavens. It became a center for learning and worship, the very thing the Shaykh had journeyed to create. Inside the entrance door, a simple plaque was placed. It did not speak of the tragedy of the Titanic, but of the triumph of faith. It read, "In memory of Shaykh Abdul Hamid of Fez. He prayed for a house of Allah in this land. In his final moments, he built one in the hearts of those he saved. May his light endure." The seed he carried from Morocco had finally, after a long and arduous journey, taken root and blossomed. Director Imam Faisal Ahmad. Graphics Halima Ahmad. Screenplay Rama Ahmad.